the scramble occurred because the ANC has been hoping that the election will be postponed beyond the 27th of October, but the Constitutional Court still has to grapple with that decision.
The African National Congress is tearing itself apart ahead of the local government elections, which are scheduled to take place on 27th of October. Although the elections may be delayed, the parties nevertheless have to submit lists of candidates to contest for local government positions. But there are now legal disputes which have arisen within the party, challenging the makeup of these lists. Joining me to discuss is Sara Gon. She's with the Daily Friend online newspaper. Sara, welcome. What is happening with the ANC internally? Why are we seeing this heightened level of internal conflict?
Well, it appeared that the ruling party hadn't got its act together to compile its lists for the municipal election, and that those lists had to be in by Monday. They had to be submitted to the IEC. One doesn't know, one can only surmise that the scramble occurred because the ANC has been hoping that the election will be postponed beyond the 27th of October, but the Constitutional Court still has to grapple with that decision. So in other words, things have to run as if on the assumption that the election will be held on the 27th of October. And I think that had a lot to do with the scrambling, because the process with the ANC is complex and can be messy.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CIA.
Okay, so I think what this reveals is just the extent of the institutional breakdown within the ANC. Never mind the governance problems in the country, which are very well known to our viewers, but the ability of the party to resolve disputes internally, to have clear and transparent electoral processes, seems to have pretty much broken down.
Well, the ANC holds its process as being the most democratic in South Africa, and that is because branch members nominate a person to be on that list. And ostensibly that is a democratic process, but there is so much, the issues of patronage, issues of scrambling for the position, competing interests, who represents you may have factions within the branches themselves. And ultimately what ends up happening is either the decision-making process becomes delayed, or the person nominated for the list is not the person who ends up in the list at the IEC. It has resulted in violence and death even, and this is very much a pattern with the ANC. And of course the whole issue of patronage and BEE complicates the process all the more. So it took them time. They had the whole weekend having to try and sort it out to present a list to the IEC.
Yeah, and as you say, Sara, the party has become a key source of access to resources. And so it's not just conflicts over political positions, but actually access to money, essentially. And for many of these councillors, in particularly rural areas, this means the difference between a life of poverty and kind of lower middle class existence. So I think it reflects also the extremely fractious state of politics and the role that money plays in South African politics.
And of course, the problem is that the desperation or the ambition is still there, but the money's running out. And that's a real problem the ANC has. It's increasingly difficult to sort of purchase the support it feels it needs to represent the branch levels. So it's very, very tricky. Whereas most of the other parties have a fairly sort of standard process that doesn't seem to result in contestation, because there are distinct processes that have an end that may not be as sort of democratic in that people are nominated by large groups, but they are certainly much neater, much tidier, and don't result in the sort of factionalism and competition that ANC voting does.
Well, let's look at the other parties now, Sara. What do you think of some of the candidates that have been put forward by the opposition parties?
Well, in fairness, I haven't actually looked at them very closely, because I've been looking more at the ANC of late, and there definitely seems to be accusation, shall we say, in the DA of the preponderance of white people. But it's a question of either going with those who put themselves forward and win the nomination, or you sort of mess around with the process and get what you think you need, and that shouldn't be the DA situation. Not in terms of their non-racial policies as they currently exist.
And this is an unusual election, Sara. It seems that parties, because of COVID and other reasons, have been reluctant to campaign aggressively. Also, there's this uncertainty around the election date. It has been promulgated for 27th of October. As you mentioned earlier, the Constitutional Court still has to make its judgment there. What do you think is the likelihood of the elections going ahead as planned on the 27th?
Oh, it's extremely difficult to tell, because what the Constitutional Court is faced with is a provision in the Constitution regarding municipal elections that is absolute. It doesn't allow for extension. It has a set dates by which elections must be held and cannot be pushed any further. Obviously, people have argued that there are all sorts of ostensibly good reasons for the extension, but that would require the court to go beyond its mandates. It's actually a very difficult question to decide.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the ANC itself has been betting on a delay, and which is one of the reasons why they haven't gotten their house in order in terms of their electoral lists. How do you think the ANC will fare at the local government elections should they go ahead?
Well, you see, there's not only the organizational issue, but there's the issue of there are a whole lot of negatives stacked against them. To some extent, the handling of the vaccines, the handling of COVID in general, and then you've had this huge and very unpleasant unrest during July, which has highlighted the factional split within the ANC to a very large extent. And the responses to it by the ANC were very, if not muted, they were sort of fairly ineffectual, and they show glaring problems with in the areas of state security, the lack of intelligence, the disputes between the various members of the security cluster. So I suspect what the ANC is really hoping for is an extension to a point where the numbers of the COVID are down and distance has been put between the unrest and the factionalism and the actual date of voting. So they will hope that they will present a more attractive face, and I'm not sure that that's likely to go in their favor.
And the spectre of the riots still hangs over Natal in particular. And earlier in the year, we had an interview with Greg Arday, the author of War Party, which was a book that chronicled the really systemic violence that characterizes the ANC in that province. And it's likely that we'll see a continuation of some of those internal conflicts. So we must be cautious that that doesn't escalate into more violence.
Look, I think as long as Jacob Zuma's facing a court action, and in fact, essentially, you don't have so much a political system in much of KZN as you have warlordism, and in that sense, it's factions based on the local, regional strongman, and it doesn't make one comfortable. Let's put it that way.
Sara Gon, thank you very much for joining us on the CRA channel. Let's hand over to you, our viewers. Why do you think the ANC is struggling so much with internal factional infighting? Please do leave your comments in the comments section below. My name is David Ansara. This is the Center for Risk Analysis. Until next time, take care.